This is Bucket Talk, a weekly podcast for people who work in the trades and construction that aren't just trying to survive, but have the ambition and desire to thrive. The opportunity in the trades and construction is absolutely ridiculous right now. So if you're hungry, it's time to eat. We discuss what it takes to rise from the bottom to the top with people who are well on their way and roll up their sleeves every single day.
All right, on this episode of Bucket Talk, we got Matt Nunn. He goes by Margin Mallet on Instagram. Matt, welcome.
Thanks, Jeremy. Happy to be here.
Hell yeah. So you work with stone on a daily basis, and you do it in a pretty old-fashioned way, and just kind of wanted to get your background on, A, how'd you get to here, and B, what like piqued your interest into starting a career and working with stone and some of the cool things that you do.
Sure. Well, grew up in Connecticut, and as anyone who's been to New England or spent any time around here, we got a lot of old dry stone walls that just like litter the countryside and line the roads. And so I always took an interest into like who the hell built these things and like how did they go about it? Who would want to go outside and spend their entire day moving rocks around? Like what is that all about? So, you know, that was always a very intriguing thing to me. So after high school, I went to school down in Kentucky for college, and I studied history. After I think it was 4 semesters, like 2 years, I just had developed slowly over time as I was studying old architecture and history and from, you know, old civilizations. And I developed more and more of an itch of wanting to figure out what this trade was about, what this whole stonework thing was about, especially like cutting stone, like by hand, like hammers and chisels. And, you know, especially back then in, you know, in the mid 2000s, late 2000s, there really wasn't much infrastructure or in our education system to figuring out how to find your way into learning this craft. So I left and I went off on my own, and I did landscaping and all sorts of things to try to get myself in on stone jobs. And from there, it was right when I first did it, I had done some carpentry, I had done some landscaping. And for me, first time I built a wall, I was like 20 years old. And right away, I was like, oh, this is it. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I want to figure it out. And
Yeah.
so, you know, so I spent the next, it's been 14 years since then, along this journey. And let me tell you, a lot of it was uphill. It was not a quick one, not an easy
Yep.
one to get good at. But, you know, it's going well in the last 5 or 6 years, I would say.
Sweet. So
Yeah.
you hit on something that's pretty interesting, and for history buffs, or if you want to visit old New England, those rock walls usually lay out the boundary for a lot of old properties. We call them farmers' walls. I would assume you call them the same. And they were placed there, correct me if I'm wrong, they were placed there because as you tilled the fields or processed the field, you would come across rock, and then they just started stacking it on the boundary. Now, I would assume some were built specifically for that reason, but the original intent was, I'm removing rocks from my property, and I'm just going to put them on the boundary of my property. So they're pretty cool, and I have one around my property, and nothing to keep like anything out, but definitely a cool feature.
Absolutely, yeah. And then the crazy thing is like the farmers would do that. They would take out all the stone that their mule pulled hose would hit, and they'd rip them out. They'd start piling them, and the next year the frost heaves in New England will push more up to the surface. So this was a continuing thing, which is why some of the longest lasting farms, especially like there's a lot of them in northern Massachusetts, this in the center of Massachusetts, like, you know, we're talking way west of Boston and Worcester here. There's a lot of farms up there which are still, they're 6-7 generations into being run, and the walls are just, there's so many of them now. Now they just put them everywhere where they have a windbreak for trees. So every 50 acres, you're going to end up with a perimeter of walls. And they still come up in some of these places and some of the newer farms. They still come up every year. It's crazy. There's just, with geologically speaking, we have, anywhere from 500 to 2,000 feet of glacial till, which is a lot of mainly just soil and rock, that before you get down to like our actual bedrock in most of New England. And it was just the deposits from the glaciers that moved from the Hudson Bay on down, 14,000 years ago. So we have the assortment of stone type is wild in our area, and the amount of it is it's almost unfathomable. So hence
That's
why we
wild.
have so many walls.
I never put two and two together because I mean, early history classes in high school and middle school, we
Hmm.
found, if you're unfamiliar with Massachusetts, there's a cape that juts out from just below Boston, out into the Atlantic Ocean, and it's called Cape Cod. And I was told that that was essentially the end of the glacier that came down, and it was pushed. It was pushed there. And whether that's true or not, I'm pretty sure it's true, but somebody will fact check me and say, "Oh, well, whatever." But I didn't realize that rock actually resurfaced over years from
Oh
being
yeah.
pushed up by frost. That's a cool
Well,
little
it's kind
tidbit.
of wild too because the rock's heavier than the ground, than the soil around it. But for
Right.
whatever reason, the frost heave just continually pushes it up until it's too deep to where it won't be affected by the frost every year. So until you get below the frost line, which in like northern Massachusetts or New Hampshire and Vermont, that frost line can be as deep as 40, 48 inches in a
Yeah.
given winter.
Yeah.
So it's a crazy thing. But yeah, I live at the mouth of the Connecticut River
Yep.
down here. And the whole Connecticut River, the Long Island Sound is all carved out by glaciers as well. So, yeah, it makes it so that we have an unlimited resource for my line of work, which is great.
Cool. So you took an interest in, obviously history, New England, stonework.
Mhm.
Was your entry into this like really that landscaping, hardscaping? You kind of learned some stuff there.
Yeah.
And I mean, because I know a lot of it now is like techno block and all of the prefabricated retaining walls and pavers
Mhm.
and what have you. Were you doing a lot of that stuff too, or were you specifically dealing with stonework?
Yeah, I was. There was a lot of the paver work, cement work, which is its own type of art form and craft.
Yeah.
Uh, it's very different than working with natural stone. Excuse me, I have cats
No,
that are
it's
going to
perfect.
walk through here. Yeah, it's very different from what I do now, which the last 6, 7, 8 years I haven't dealt with any like concrete walls or paver work. Um, which isn't even as much at this point. Like that's just I people don't hire me for that anymore. They know me
No, totally. Yeah.
for the stone walls and things like that. But yeah, it's where I would say 3 out of every 4 jobs I did in the hardscape stonework field for my 20s were there was pavers involved, at least, if not. A lot of times I'd go to a job and I'd have the customer be like, we'd like a block retaining wall here, and then maybe a paver walkway. And my first order of business was to be like, okay, well, try to, all right, yeah, I'm gonna try to sell you on this is why we should try to, use the natural resource that's literally right there. Like I can
Yep.
see an abundance of stone. We could take that wall, we could rebuild it into this retaining wall, and it's going to save you a massive material cost and 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 a lot less like traffic through your backyard or whatever it might be. Like it's just for me, I always saw that as like, this is a greener trade than using concrete, and also it's like using what's here on your property already, or at least is a local product that you might get from a quarry up the road or whatever it might be. But yeah, a lot of my work came originally from either doing pavers or selling a customer on why to use bluestone or granite as opposed to
That's actually
concrete.
a cool take. I didn't even it didn't even dawn on me that like that's an awesome thing to do, to be able to incorporate the history of the property, b,
Hmm.
an abundance of material that's already there, and then just repurpose it. And
Yeah.
I, to me, I'm thinking you're importing, Cape and granite, or working
Right.
with a whole bunch of different retailers or quarries, or what have you, to
Yeah,
obviously get like a 10 wheeler of rock dumped. And I'm sure that happens, but like,
for
I didn't
sure.
realize that you actually, repurpose old property lines and what have you into the new
Yeah.
property. That's
I've
crazy.
built a lot of my favorite walls I've ever built were with like old walls that I just moved 50 feet because they weren't even being seen in the woods anymore or whatever, and then used it. And then people are like, wow, they can't believe that they had this amazing resource right next to them, because people are just so used to seeing it. And when they're dilapidated, they don't look like anything.
Right.
So when you put it
Yeah.
back together, though, it's all right. But yeah, I think that's it made it an easy sell a lot when you come at it from this, like, this is, let's use what's on your property, and like, in fact, I can make something look like this with what you already have here. And
Hmm.
the real issue, the reason more people don't do this is not because people want to work with concrete block. Like, most guys in my trade, in the hardscape trade or the stonework trade, they love the idea, the artistry that comes with, like, working with stone. It's like every rock's different, and like, especially with field stone, it's very hard to work with. It's not, you can't shape it like granite, where you can kind of do what you want. It just takes time. Field stone is kind of use it as it is, and it's very difficult, therefore, to quote it correctly and make good money. So
Yeah.
whereas with like a block wall, you know exactly how much you can put out a day.
Yeah.
It takes a long time to like a lot of years of doing this work to get to that place with dry stone work, I think. So I
So
think that's what
so
pushes people away.
so without getting, like, I guess, too deep into how you charge your customer, but like,
Hmm.
if you were to do some of this reclaim, reuse work, um do you kind of go in with like an open mind, and like the customer's like, hey, like, you have this resource, obviously it's going to be cheaper than bringing in material. That
Yeah.
being said, I don't know how much of this material we can use, or I don't know if we're actually going to have to bring more material. And like, how does that play into your process?
Well, each one's different. Each
Yeah.
situation's different. How is the site access? Like, how easily can we access or source material from the property? How much do we need to bring in from outside the property, from a quarry or from old farm walls? My guy Scott up at Authentic Fieldstone, who I'm sure you follow on
Hmm.
Instagram, like he gets paid, or he's in league with a few farms up in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, where there's farmers that he pays to take down some of the walls that they don't want anymore because they have so many.
Yep.
And like, so they'll be like, yeah, I don't want that wall. So instead of paying someone to take it out, they'll they'll get Scott will pay them, because he'll take it out and he'll sell the stone. So like, I get some of my stone from him once in a while when I need to like add to it, because New England Fieldstone blends with New England Fieldstone regardless of how far away one comes from the other.
Right.
Um, so like, that part's the trickiest part of it all, though, is like, honestly, quoting these types of jobs when you're doing new construction with old material can be very difficult. I know the vast majority of guys in my line of work just go the safest route, which is like, look, we're going to do time and material, and and that's the best way to ensure that you're going to, not destroy your profit margin.
Yep.
Um, I try to go based off the square footage with things. So if I'm building walls, I like to do by the square footage. So I have rates for uh, straight up rebuilds if I'm going and doing a tear down and rebuild of old walls, or versus new construction. And my biggest variables are definitely like, how accessible is this, both for me as a craftsman, but also with machinery, um, and like, and what's the material like? Because some material takes a lot longer to build with, or you need to
Yep.
shape it more. So those are the big variables, I would say, to like what number of per square foot that I end up falling into.
Cool. So let's talk about tooling. So I watched a demonstration up in the Catskills by you,
Yeah.
and you know, you were working with granite and stone and using feathers and splitting and stuff like that. But like,
Hmm.
you know, as we're talking about volume and mass and weight of some of these pieces,
Yeah.
um, you work with, you know, excavation equipment. Do you work with you know, a local contractor to move the stuff around, like, or are you actually moving it around yourself? Like, how does that all work?
I mean, I've definitely done both.
Yeah.
So there's been jobs where I tell the client like, look, there's a lot that goes into the prep work here.
Yep.
I'm gonna give the site, the design work, the layout of the walls, and where I need my materials to an excavation company. You're gonna pay them separately. They're gonna come in before me. They're gonna get this site prepped to these specs, and then I'm
Okay.
gonna come in and just do the construction. There's
Mhm.
times I have my own mini excavator, so there's times when I can just take care of the whole thing together, and I can lift a lot of the rocks myself with a mini. I've rented equipment before, and you know, I've unfortunately more than I should have. I've definitely just straight up lifted things constantly that I probably shouldn't be lifting, and that's I'm 34. I wake up every morning, and if I don't stretch, like I'm not pliable until noon.
Yeah.
So like that's a part of the job as well. Too many rocks have been lifted, and it comes with the territory. I will say, like, I want to talk to you about the moon gate a little bit on this podcast that I built
Hmm.
with Green Monster. I think you've probably seen it.
Yep.
Um, it was one of the coolest projects I've been a part of, uh, because none of the stones are liftable by a human hand. Like they're all over 400 pounds,
Yep.
and including the keystone, which is like 11
Yes.
feet in the air and it weighs like 1,700 pounds. I spent an entire day cutting that keystone out of a giant boulder of granite, right? And it started with feather and wedges, like drilling and splitting. I had to figure out exactly how the angles are going to be, like the dimensions I want for this thing, front to back on all the sides, and then there was like 6 hours of just straight chiseling constantly, until I got that thing done, and it was super satisfying when you finish a project like that, just one rock for one day. But lifting that thing and getting it into place, Mark up there at Green Monster, he has uh, one of those Encons, the tilt
Yeah.
rotators. Yeah, you've seen those; they're amazing. And without that tool, like in the grapple that picked those rocks up, like that project probably would have taken us, I mean, I don't know, several dozen more hours just in the trying and the fitting of stones and lifting them up in the air, because we would have been strapping them and had to have a guy down below and spinning it and then pulling the straps out. It's a whole thing, and with what he has, it changes the game quite a bit. So, you
Every
know,
time I see that, those arches or moon
yeah,
gates like created, um, I mean, obviously there's a science behind it, but it's interesting to see that it's self-supporting, right? It
oh
is
yeah,
loose stone, but
yeah,
because
no
this,
cement, no metal, yeah,
and
yeah,
it's all self-supporting, and that
hmm
keystone kind of just like locks it all into place.
takes
But like
care of
when you're
everything. Yeah,
under it, you have thousands of pounds of stone that
oh
there's no
yeah,
rebar, there's no fasteners, there's no
no.
nothing.
It's just
And
friction and gravity, man, and proper math. It's a little sketchy. The first time because I did that whole top half of the arch, like before we like secured it onto the bottom half of the moon gate, right?
Mhm.
And I did that, and Mark got on the last couple of days, and he was like, "Are you sure about what we're doing?" I'm like, "I think so." I mean, it is just physics. Like
Yeah.
you can trust numbers, right? So like
Yeah.
the whole thing I engineered with all sorts of math, and I checked it every night. I would go to bed like running numbers, like because I'm like anxious. I'm like, is this am I gonna kill someone?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like you said, that top half of the arch, it's like 7 tons. Like
Yeah.
it literally weighs like as much as a triaxle truck empty does. It's
Yeah.
it's a wild amount of granite that's up there, and there's no no space between the joints, so it's like it is secure. Like it's gonna outlive me by a long time. But like when you first do it and you pull that form, it took me like an hour of hanging out next to it to feel like I could breathe and like that's not going anywhere. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it was
Yeah.
it's a weird feeling, even especially as the guy that did it, because you don't just have the like, is this safe, as like someone else. You have like the responsibility of like, this
Yeah.
damn well better be safe.
Yeah.
I hope I did that right. I hope so I put the form back up. I like check, because every joint has to radiate towards the center point of the circle, and that's the
Mhm.
that's the concept. And if you achieve that on both front to back, then you've achieved a proper weight distribution. Um,
So that was going to be my question, and maybe you've already answered it, but like I still haven't figured it out. Is like, as you put something heavy on 2 points, right? There's the possibility that those two bases will shift outward due to
yeah,
the weight on top of
yeah.
it. So how do you, is it prep work to the base? Is it just like the geometry of it, and that how does that all work?
It's a little bit of both. Like, so you need the thrust of the arch needs to be able to push down and not be able to tilt the two, we call them springer stones.
Okay.
They're called the springer. So the two stones that will spring the actual arch are
Yep.
called, you could, so it's kind of in the name, right? Those stones, the weight needs to want to push them both as much in as out. Like
Mm-hmm.
they want to tilt them as much this way as this way, so that you don't create an opposing thrust and cave the whole arch in. So that comes down to like how thick, both in terms of height and in terms of width, your springer stones are. Then there's the dimension. There's the other dimension, which is the depth dimension. So the whole thing has a batter. So if you're inside it, it goes up, with a batter, with a noticeable batter, so that there's support outside of each face
Yep.
as well. So nailing all that is super important. And then obviously, like the base of the foundation of any type of masonry construction is incredibly important. So the structure that supports, because a moon gate, the truth of a moon gate is it's not a full circle that supports itself. It's a aesthetic half moon on the bottom
Mm-hmm.
that's part of a foundation that supports an arch up top.
Correct.
Like, and therefore the half moon on the bottom is literally just a support. It's not like the circle up top actually thrusts the whole thing together. The bottom half thrusts itself together, like the support is there within
Yeah.
itself, but it's not carrying the weight up top by itself. Because if you did just build a circle by itself, it would just blow off. Like
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't work. Like gravity doesn't allow that to work. You need to have abutments, if you will, like supporting wall structure that comes off that is absolutely mandatory. Because that's where the thrust of the arch wants to go over time. So that part is like, that's some masonry engineering that goes into that. So how you build those supporting abutment walls is crucial. And then obviously down way at the bottom, you have the foundation, which is, I can tell you about how we do our foundations for those types of walls if you'd like. I mean, it's getting into the
No,
weeds, but
I mean, just the fact that like there's a lot of site work, prep work that goes
oh,
into it,
so much,
and
yeah.
that, I mean, this is fascinating, the conversation that I'm having with you, because like, you know, if you watch what you do, right,
Mhm.
it goes from like I can do that to now talking to you, and I'm like, how many fucking years of school did you go through to learn what you've learned? You know what I mean? Because like,
Yeah.
and I don't want to take away from the trade, and I think there's a lot of people with a lot of trades that like their toxic trait is like, oh, I can fucking do that, right? And the reality is you could achieve something like that maybe,
Yeah.
but the reality is there's a lot more that goes into it, and the knowledge that you've gained over the years is incredible, and it's self-taught. I mean, do you do a lot
Pretty
of
much.
like, wow, wow.
Well, for me it was, but I don't recommend my journey for anyone else
Hmm.
that's trying to get into this. I recommend starting with working for another company, or
Yep.
especially the Stone Trust. And I know you've heard of the Stone Trust up there, and the headquarters are up in Dimerston, Vermont, or Brattleboro, something in
Yep.
southern Vermont. You know, in terms of getting into to dry stonework, and that's the best way. Like if I wish I knew that existed when I was, you know, younger, because it would have saved a lot of headache.
Yeah.
But then again, like where I'm at in my journey, part of it's happened because I tried and I failed and I tried and I failed and I tried and I failed. And I did it so many times that I kept narrowing my focus to the point where like I was, you know, I became obsessed, and it became my life. And that in my late 20s, I made a point of figuring out, not figuring out. It was like more I said to myself for my 20s, I said to myself, your teacher is what the ancients did. Like I look back at things that happened in Rome 2,000 years ago, and to this day, even knowing what I know now, I still look back at so much work from then, and I go, "Holy shit!"
Yeah.
These guys were geniuses, and not only that, there were the skill that was on display at, it must have been an army worth of skill, that I would still go into a site there and be a laborer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's like, to me, I think that it's important that we recognize that there's only a couple trades this is true for, and I think stonework and masonry and blacksmithing are the two that come to mind, that have always come to mind. Like the level of the quality of stonework we see from across the world, from ancient India to China to Peru to the Mayan Empire to Rome and Greece, and then Egypt above all, probably, is it's humbling. And then like I will always see even that cool moon gate I built, and probably if I ever get the chance to build something cooler, it's still going to just be like an average week in ancient Rome.
Yep.
And that's like, so psychologically that's important to like recognize, like you never are I don't think there's such thing as a master at this. Like I genuinely think like that if there was, they died 400 years ago.
Yep.
But you know, I think that's the standard we should be holding ourselves to, is um, not just our own nowadays, but like what we see from there's forts and military forts all over New England that were built in the
Yeah.
1800s that they shame almost all the work that we do nowadays. They really do. They do. And it's like I was up in Bucksport doing a great job for Dan Morales, Maine Stonescapes, and for Matthew Cunningham
Yep.
last year. And Fort Knox is up there, right?
Yep.
And it's like we're doing awesome granite work up the road from this place, like with huge pieces of granite, using all the machines, using saws and chisels, and with tungsten carbide in them, and like thinking we're killing it. And then I'd like, after work, I'd like go to this fort, which was built like pre-carbide era, like when there wasn't any excavators or machines, and they didn't have saws, or at least like gas-powered saws,
Right.
pre-combustion engine. And these dudes did something that's way better than what we're doing up there. And I mean, granted, they had like 75 people at all times for like 8 years, but like I don't really care, because what it takes to do what they did, regardless of time, is just like, as someone who does it, I know what it would take. They would go to work one week and be like, I'm going to work on half of that rock this week, and then maybe next week I'll finish that rock. And like to get yourself to the point where you're like okay with that, that's really cool to me, you know.
Actually, what came to mind, and if you haven't been there out in Western Mass, it's called the Shaker Village, and there's this big, I don't even know what it's called, but in the middle of the Shaker Village is like this circular stone building, and it's
Yeah,
crafted out in the middle of nowhere. It looks like it wouldn't stand the test of time, and then it's
right.
been there it's been there longer than some of the buildings that have been built in the 70s, 80s, 90s.
Yeah,
But one thing that stuck out is not only the precision of the job, But
Mhm.
the fact that, like, to your point, 75 guys were working on Fort Knox,
Yeah.
and they had to work together because, like, I'm working over here, you're working over there, and
Yeah.
like it's wild to get everything to
My
line up
stone's got to fit next to yours perfectly. Like it's like
perfectly.
6 feet deep, and the joint is like this the whole way.
Yeah,
And then we're
right.
gonna put a little tiny bed of mortar between them, but it's like the stone's like 3 feet tall and like 4 feet thick, and our joint's gonna line up. It's not even gonna twist. It's wild, man. It's wild what they were doing.
I
And
want to
like you
do.
said, they're it's not like one dude got to do it the whole time. They
Yeah,
do that,
yeah,
75 dudes doing 75 stones, and then bam, they're all perfect. Like, come
right, right.
on.
So that's actually I want to do something fun here. Um,
Okay,
conspiracy, right?
sure. Let's talk about it.
Knowing what you know,
Yeah.
was the pyramids of Giza, do you think they were actually created by a man? And if they were, take a stab at like how they did it. I mean, it's
Okay.
not only was it the masonry and the craftsmanship and like the
Mhm.
sheer mass of it,
Mhm.
but it's
Yeah.
also the alignment with like astrology. Now, I'm not saying I know I have an answer, but like both sides can make compelling arguments. You use enough
Oh
people
God, yeah.
with they didn't give a shit, like, but to such precision, and then the alignment to the stars plus the mystery around it, like you can't help but think like we didn't create it, somebody else did. What are your thoughts?
So I have a lot of thoughts with this,
Okay.
but because this is exactly what I studied in college, which led me to wanting to maybe uncover some more understanding of the toil that would be within the hand process,
Yeah.
of tooling. So I will start by saying I believe we did it.
Okay.
I believe we did it, but that doesn't mean I believe entirely that in Darwinism. So like, and then I don't mean that in any religious way. God no. I mean like I'm not 100% sure that our missing DNA links aren't because like ancient humans traveled from a different star system. So like, was there more knowledge than we understand? Probably, but who
Okay.
can say? So like that's a whole different level of the conspiracy. Let me get
Totally.
back
Totally.
to yeah. Let me get back to it for you. So like I think let me start with I think the ancient Egyptians knew the world was round. I think they knew the world wasn't even a perfect sphere. I think they knew it was slightly elongated at the equator. I think
Hmm.
they knew the exact shape of the earth because I think they had not only sailed it, but I think when by the time the Pyramid of Giza was built, their civilization had been around for I think about 2,000 years, if I remember correctly. It's something a long time. Like they had
Yeah.
basically the amount of time that the ancient Egyptians had a continuous civilization before the construction of the Great Pyramid was more time than from the construction of the Great Pyramid, than more time than from the fall of ancient Rome to now. So
Okay.
like their civilization was so long lasting and continuous, and it was an empire. Um, what we do know, we have documents proving this that astronomy was one of their highest touted or respected professions.
Hmm.
They they stargazed from the same places all around the country and mapped out the stars every night. And over the course of the 1,500 to 2,000 years before the pyramids were built, the Great Pyramids were built, they had enough evidence to recognize that slowly but surely the stars moved. The stars, the alignment in the sky moved. And this
Hmm.
is called this is in astronomically speaking, this is called the precession of the equinoxes. And it's a thing where I think it's like 27 or 29,000 years, um, the true north or the pole stars will shift.
Hmm.
And it happens over time. It doesn't happen randomly. It happens very slowly. So the
Yep.
movement is not noticeable by any one astronomer in their lifetime. I think it's like there's like a zero point 0.1 or 0.2% movement every 90 years or something like that. So this can only be recognized by generations of generations upon generations, without our technology that we have now.
Yeah.
If you mapped and then you realize, wow, this has moved since so and so recorded this 400 years ago. it's only a little, but it's moving. What's going on? And after enough time with understanding of mathematics, and which is just logic and common sense, I believe that they were able to recognize the true size, shape, and location of the Earth within our solar system and the universe. Now that led them probably into a massive amount of other discoveries and things, and including the alignments of the pyramid and why the pyramid seems to align with true north. The sides of the pyramid all add up to the like coordinates of where it is on the planet. So I don't remember the exact things, but it's fucking wild. Like
Yeah, it is. It is.
it's fucking wild. And like and like, I don't begin to understand just how much of that was intentional or not. I definitely think logic would say it's beyond coincidence, right? Like all of those things.
Yeah.
But that said, when I investigate my own, when I look at the marks left on the stone and the construction method itself from stone to stone throughout the pyramid, I see hand tooling. I see methods that aren't unknown to me.
Yeah.
Or even on like you can replicate these methods, even most of them without modern technology as well, as long as time becomes a little less of a factor or your workforce is fucking massive.
Massive.
Yeah, fucking massive. Like, so I think you need both of those things. Like, you need to be, aware that like it's going to take 4 days to cut through this 4-foot block, but like, or whatever it might be, and but like, and we have, oh yeah, like throw 1,000 dudes on that rock to like move it 100 feet. Like, sure, like, those things are hard for us to fathom in today's world. I mean, even now, like I'm doing a job, I like to be able to take my time, man, but like I'm stressed. Like I'm always fucking stressed. Like I got to be done with this thing by then because I told so and so that I'm going to be on their job at this time, and just leads me to like always being strapped for time instead of
Yeah.
and I need to make a certain amount of money. And if I quote it this much, I'm like, all right, well, I need to fucking, be able to eat and like, so I don't know. I think like we live in a very different world and and all that. But I'm to sum it up, I am of the belief that humans did it.
Okay.
I do believe that there was more understanding and knowledge than a lot of our historians give credit to ancient civilizations having. I think, and that I say that like I'm undervaluing just how much I believe that to be the case.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think it's just a travesty that we don't have more documentation from that civilization that lasted for, I think in total it lasted for 4,500 years before
Wow.
it fell apart. And that's more time than, that's pretty much like the amount of time we have history. Like, so it's hard to understand what kind of connected knowledge they might have had that we don't know about.
Well, and it's funny too, like it seems like, and you can go down the history of the Masons, the Freemasons, the Masons, stuff like that. It's amazing how much conspiracy there is around masonry in general.
Oh God,
right?
yeah, yeah. It's where the most of the conspiracy lies. It really is,
So if you become a Mason, you get to unlock all of this knowledge.
That's what everyone thinks. I've had people, you're a fucking Freemason, aren't you? I'm like, no, I'm not a fucking Freemason. But like, also, the origin of Freemasonry is just like fucking dudes trying to get together and say they understand how the world works because they hit rocks. Like,
Yeah.
so there's nothing special about it, man. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe there is some cult following that you and I have no idea about. Some like elite lizard people or something like that.
Yeah, right.
Like, I don't know. It's above my pay grade.
No, I mean, I look at, we're probably some Freemason be like, there's more to it than that. But I mean, again, I think it's just a bunch of people getting together that have the same ideals and trades, and they're probably having drinks after work and shit like that. And it's like, we're the Freemasons now.
Yeah, we're the Freemasons.
Yeah, fuck you, painters, you can't come in. So, but yeah, no, it's wild, and like, stonework is just unbelievable. And do you feel like it's becoming a lost art? Do you think there's a resurgence? Like, where is masonry going as a whole? Because it stood the test of time up until
Hmm.
like the past couple of 100 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Even less. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's definitely qualifies as the term of like a lost art. Um, I do think it's staying alive with some strength, but in a very niche area. And
Yeah.
like a lot of us are relegated to what we've become is like in the natural stone world, what we've become is a luxury more than a necessity.
Hmm.
And whereas the people that used to do what we do and share the same ideals um, and skills as I have and my friends and my fellow craftsmen in the natural stone world have, like it used to be a necessity. We used to be part of the building blocks of a town or a civilization, and one of the most respected professions throughout a lot of human history.
Yeah.
It is now a niche. We are now considered artists as opposed to craftsmen, like a lot of
Yeah.
times. And I'm not even saying that that's like the worst thing. I don't know if that's going to change in my lifetime. Like if like we don't, at least in our country, we don't live in a world where um, engineers and architects, because of insurance, a lot of times because of liability, they they're going to go with concrete and rebar
Hmm.
because it's secure and they don't have to trust in the artistry and the craftsmanship of people that are laying stone. Because like how you lay stone, each stone needs to be laid properly within, and it's all in collaboration with the stones around it. There's so much more of a of I don't know. I don't want to say a skill because there's skills in all of these trades. I don't want to poo-poo anyone here, but like there's a reason that cement is what the architects and engineers choose, and it's not just because, I mean, architects, if given the chance, they would choose natural stone. It's almost always better looking.
Yeah.
Everyone would agree with that. But they choose cement because they want to keep their job, and like they don't want, it's a big risk, and
That's
that's
a
it.
that's a
So
that's an interesting take because if you follow, like, I just caught a piece, I forget what civilization, but essentially it was Egypt. The highlight of Egyptians was death, right? So death was looked
yeah,
at differently, you know, 200-300 years ago to man's, to the start of man. And
right.
now it's like it's people have always been dying, but it was like it happens then, and now it's like it can't happen now to anybody ever. And like I don't I don't disagree with it, but it's definitely a mind shift to where, like, I'm sure 7 people died while building Fort Knox, but you know what? The project
Yeah,
must go on. Like, who gives a shit about the 7 guys that died? This thing needs to be built. Um,
yeah,
and it's part of the process as a statistic. It's a built-in variable, like whatever.
yeah. It
Now it's like,
used to be honorable, man. You died honorably.
yeah.
Like fuck yeah, we're gonna toast to you. like,
and,
like Jeremy
and
gave his blood for this construction. Like
they
he
did not
fought
have
valiantly, and
they did,
we will praise his memory. Like it just doesn't. This isn't the way anymore, man.
no.
Like
Now we got to
nowadays, it's
sign.
like who can we sue? Who's gonna get sued? Like like fuck you. I don't know. It's
No,
just
I
it's
I get it, and
ridiculous.
I think to that point, I mean, um, it's it's changed a lot of things in trades in general. I mean, um, not saying fuck OSHA. OSHA did a lot of things for tradesman safety and everything like that. But it's
If
funny
you're not,
because
I
it's
mean, I'll
like,
say it. I'll say it if you're not gonna. But no.
but there's now we have safety standards for everything,
Right.
and then
Yeah.
we're probably going to get to a point where safety standards actually probably hinder us to some point. Like, it's
Oh
like
yeah.
we can't do anything. Like,
Yep.
Johnny got a laceration, and like now he's not going to be back to work for 2 years. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, no, it's an interesting shift in mindset and culture. Just how we've gone from a push. I guess it was a more communal effort, right?
Yeah,
Versus now it's more of a individual standpoint. It's
it
like,
is.
I'm not gonna die for this job, but like, back then, iron workers walking I-beams with no whatever, they're like, somebody's gonna die. Might be me. Wild.
It is wild, and that's definitely the truth. Is a lot of these things, a lot of these are great things. The difference between why we don't see these amazing feats as much anymore, it's it's because of that exact thing. It's because people used to band together and do it, and even in like communities, they'd get together like, oh, it's like the Amish, man. Like the Amish still do it.
Yeah.
All right, we're all gonna get together and move Henry's house like fucking a half mile on Saturday, and like 80 of them will get together and like just like put some beams under it and like walk and then have lunch and then walk again with this
Could
house.
you
And it's
imagine
like,
suggesting that nowadays? They're like, hey, I
no,
want to move on.
dude, like you go knock on your neighbor's door. Go knock on your neighbor's door and be like, hey, like I'm gonna try to get the community together to like move my shed. Like and they'll be like, I'm gonna call the cops if you don't leave. Like that's literally their answer. And if they're nice, they'll be like, here, rent some equipment,
Yeah.
get the fuck off my like fucking porch. But yeah, no, that's not the way it is anymore, man. And that, I think that's the thing right there. Like that's it. And which is like, so I know we follow each other. I know you've seen like how in my little niche of a craft, like what Instagram has done, what social media has done for us is it's brought so many of us we are the definition of the solo dudes. Like we all are. And it's bred over time. It had always bred this like that's the competition and like fuck what he's doing or like there's like insecurities and egos get created and like there's so much of that in my craft because everyone is getting branded as the artist and the customers that hire, oh, your work's so beautiful, oh my god, you're such an artist, blah blah blah, and then obviously everyone's head gets fucking huge
Yeah.
and everyone's like worried about the competition or hating the competition and it's just like it all of a sudden we're now not only are we just living in a world where we don't get together to do these cool things. We're now actually as artists, as craftsmen, we're pushing back from even the chance of that. And that was something I always noticed in this in my craft until I got on Instagram and started putting pictures of my fucking rocks up on there and like yeah, that was it. It was like and then like I started following dudes that were also throwing pictures of rocks up and I'm like, holy shit, I love that. And
Yeah.
like other people were like, holy shit, I love what you're doing. And then we're like, let's be friends, let's work together. And next thing you know, like as you started this podcast, like you traveling right now? Like when's your, because that I just travel. Like that's
Yeah.
basically been my last 5 years is I'm like a mercenary. I go wherever I am attracted to go, like to a job or wherever I'm asked to go. Like when people sometimes I reach out to people and be like, hey, I want to work with you. I like what you're doing. Like, can I come on with you for a few days or whatever? And other times it's people being like, hey, I like what you're doing. Can you come help me out? Or can I get on yours or whatever? And like what's happened is over these last few years, and it really is like it's the most beautiful thing that's happened was from social media that I know of is like it's brought so many of us together and so many of my good friends that I have now in my life are you know people I work with that I've met through Instagram and
That's
it's
wild.
awesome. It is
That's
awesome, man.
It's almost like a full circle moment. It's using today's technology to bring about a resurgence of an old way of living, right?
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
to that point, I've always said that like the death of the mom and pop store or the small business owner comes from not having the support of others that are like-minded, and then obviously you see yourselves as competition, you cannibalize each other
Yeah.
until obviously big business comes in and just knocks over a small business. Like it's just easier to knock over all these individual small businesses than rather having a group of people that hold on to that market and band together and and really drive change. And I mean, it's awesome. It's really cool. The maker community has been one of them. I mean, everybody's an individual in their own right, but
Yeah.
together they make up this like massive wealth of knowledge, this
Oh yeah.
massive like think tank that is just unbelievable. And they're trying new
Yeah.
things, and they're borrowing, and they're selling, and they're trading, and it's crazy. And that was all brought together by Instagram, Facebook, TikTok,
Yeah.
like these platforms that like are just connecting people all over the place.
They are. It's the best thing that's come from it, and you've touched on it. It is kind of like coming full circle. I feel like there is a bit of, we might be at the beginning of a revolution back towards how it always used to be, back towards doing these great things together. I've been a part of a few of them. Like I just told you, in like a week, I'm going out to out west on a big job, and it's a this will be the third year in a row I've been out there on this job, and I've gotten to meet dudes from around the country that were like brought together for this job, and every time I go out there, we get to build pretty cool shit,
Yeah.
And more than that, I'm getting to work with guys that are like, they come at the trade like I do, with the same passion I do, but they bring way different things to the table. So every time I get to work with these dudes, I get better.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's the way with all of us. And like the job up in Bucksport, Maine, like I got way better. Everyone did. And we all fed off each other's energy. So like the days were like super long days, but they felt like there's nothing we'd all rather be doing in the world. And there's just this camaraderie and this collaborative energy that's just like, it's really it's really like contagious. And those are jobs where like there's been a max 10 of us on. And
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it would feel like to have, you know, 5, 10 times that number on a job that like, or on any type of task, whether it was a day job or a single day, or a project like, constructing a cathedral, or which is obviously like a whole different
Yeah.
world, but like, or even just building a house. Like, and we don't, we just, I wonder if we're starting, because like I've had my own jobs now, and like right when I signed up for this last job, I got to do some design that I'm very into. I think it's gonna be really beautiful, and I get to finish it, and I get to plant it and make it, green, not just rocks.
Yeah.
But right away I'm like, okay, well, I want to get some help on this. Like, I want not just that, but I want to involve other people that I like on this.
Totally.
So it's like, okay, where can I fit in, and who can I fit in into this project? And it's like that mindset is pretty new for me, as like I've only been running my own jobs a few times the last few years. In my 20s, I ran all my own jobs, but these last few years I've been a mercenary. So now that I'm running my own jobs a lot again, this year and going forward, it's like all of a sudden, instead of being like, no, I'm the only one that can do it to the way I want to and whatever, it's like, no, fuck that. Like that dude, all down the line, like what could they bring? Like where would they fit in? How would that work together? And you're trying, it's almost like this chemistry experiment where you're, and it's amazing how each one can be different, and all of them can be good. Literally every one of it can, all of it can be good if you're just getting dudes that just want to be there.
Yeah.
And I think that's, and you've got a bunch of employees. Like the most important thing is like that they want to be there, that they're into it, that
Yeah.
they're invested with you, because like, yeah, then they're gonna, if they are, then they're gonna give it their best. And some dude's best might be different than the others,
Yeah.
but like it makes it no less valuable or more valuable. So
Totally.
I don't know. That's something
Well,
I've enjoyed a lot.
this was fun, actually. This was a good podcast. I think that, touching on the trade, obviously key, but getting to play around with some thought and some free thinking, I think was great. But Honestly, I think as kids, you play with dirt, you move rocks. I mean, I think most kids want to be an excavator when they grow up and stuff like
Mm.
that. But anybody that continues with that mindset, if they were to get in this kind of work, um, where could they find you? How could they reach out? What are some of the resources that they could tap into?
Well, they can reach out to me on Instagram at Margin Mallet. Um, I think the best resource, if they're in America, the best resource to reach out to is the Stone Trust or the Dry Stone Conservancy.
Hmm.
Um, these are two organizations that are run by people a lot older and wiser than me, that will help people fast track to understanding and learning the trade without all the pitfalls that can come with it. Um, and yeah, and I think what I'd urge anyone that is interested, I'd urge them to not hesitate and not be too nervous or worried, because there's a lot of us. Anyone that they can find on Instagram that I've talked to, every single one of us is open to sharing what they know, and to helping out anyone that's trying to get into it. So yeah, it's the Stone Trust is the first place I would start though. Yeah,
Hell yeah. Well, Matt, thanks for being on the podcast. This was truly
my
enlightening,
pleasure,
and
Jeremy.
I can't wait to have more conversation in the future. But definitely a great look into what you do in a day in the life. And again,
Cool.
thanks.